You're listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, where you get valuable information you just can't find anywhere else. To thrive in today's trying times, you need the Financial Survival Network, now more than ever. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and get your free newsletter and gift. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.
Welcome. You are listening to watching the Financial Survival Network. I'm your host, Kerry Lutz. Well, John Rubino is with us for our bi-weekly chat. And, well, John, if this isn't a slowdown, I read today that layoffs are quadruple what they were last year. And, of course, nobody's talking about it, but you got tech layoffs at every major tech company in the country, except maybe Tesla hasn't announced any layoffs yet, but how far can they be off?
Yeah, it does seem like everybody's laying people off. Well, you know, first quarter GDP was up only 1.1%, or at a rate of 1.1%, which means the economy is almost at stalling speed already. So it's not a surprise there are layoffs, but pretty much everywhere you look, there are signs of a slowdown right now because pending home sales just went down for the first time since November. Lumber prices are plunging because of pending home sales being down. You know, commercial real estate. I think we talked about commercial real estate last time, right? But it's in a crisis. You know, at least certain sectors of commercial real estate are. Oil gave back its post OPEC surprise production cut jump. You know, it's almost back down to where it was before that, and that's probably because of the slowing economy. And you know, the big one is that the M2 money supply continues to go down. And I posted a thing called "You can't taper a Ponzi scheme" the other day, and the point is that we've cut off the money spigot. There isn't new money being created in order to roll over debt and bail out people who need bailouts. And so that means some sectors of the economy just won't get the money they need to survive, and they're going to start blowing up. And commercial real estate is an obvious one, but a lot of lenders are either cutting off car dealers completely from credit or are making it really hard for car buyers to get loans on, especially used cars. So you're seeing stuff like that all through the economy. And what that means is lots of people aren't going to be able to borrow or are not going to be able to roll over debt. And a lot of them are going to go bankrupt. They're going to stiff their creditors, who will then go bankrupt. So you get one of these cascade failure things going when you try to shrink the money supply. And it's not clear that they're doing anything to reverse that. In fact, the Fed and the ECB are scheduled to raise rates on May 4th. So watch that day. That's going to be a big day. If inflation comes out, I think on May 2nd, at least for the EU, and then the central banks raise interest rates in the face of whatever the inflation number is, then that's probably going to scare the equity markets or at least sober up the equity markets, because, you know, stocks have gone back up. They're almost back up to where they were before the last bear market started. And that's not normally how it should be heading into a recession. So I think very good chance of some financial sectors blowing up on a level that's big enough to need a government bailout and an equities bear market at the same time. So the second half of this year could be a lot scarier than the first half has been so far.
Yeah, it's been pretty scary, that's for sure. Well, we can pretty much anticipate that when this happens, it's going to happen in the first quarter. It's going to happen like September, October. But one thing I noticed with Nick Santiago from In the Money Stocks is we started a peculiar phenomena, and that is market crashes taking place during holidays. We had a couple of them over the past 6 months. We never used to get a crash during a holiday weekend, a 3-day weekend where the A team basically goes off to their Hamptons jaunts and leaves it to the B team and the C team to keep things going for a day. Now, I don't think they're going off to the Hamptons so quick when the holidays come, because something has happened to the market where these crashes have started to occur.
Yeah. And what's our next holiday to test that thesis? Is it the 4th of July?
Memorial Day. And that's also Urban Week in Miami. So it's a great time to not come to Miami.
Urban Week.
Yeah.
I haven't heard of that. Is that Cinco de Mayo or is that
a hip hop festival at
okay.
Just leave it at that.
Okay. Yeah.
So layoffs are just through the roof. Oil prices skidding, and more importantly, money supply going down, deficit going up. That sucks up all the available dollars. Are we going to have like a dollar shortage here where we really do have deflation, John?
Well, that's that is kind of what we're saying, because if everybody needs to roll over debt or to borrow to buy something, then they all need dollars for that, right? And if we're shrinking the supply of dollars, then logically you could say that, well, interest rates have to go up. The dollar exchange rate will probably go up relative to other currencies. And so you get a tightening of monetary conditions that way. So that might be how a shrinking money supply manifests in the economy via a tightening of monetary conditions in a lot of different places in a lot of different ways. And yeah, that wouldn't be a surprise. So it could be that this coincides with a quote unquote strong dollar, and that, however you slice it from there, the effects are really bad.
Yeah. And they're global in scope here. This isn't just one country having an issue, John. This is the whole world.
Well, almost everybody is tightening. And, the ECB is the shocking one. I wasn't really paying attention to them, but they raised their version of the Fed funds rate from negative 0.5% to 3% in less than a year, which is a really fast increase in interest rates. And a lot of the periphery countries in Europe, the PIGS countries, which is what, Portugal, Italy, Greece, and Spain. Yeah.
Right.
And anyhow, their interest rates, especially on their 10-year treasury bonds, have gone way up. Italy's is up in the 4s now. So this is a country that's so over leveraged that it had to have interest rates pushed by the ECB down to below what the U.S. Treasury pays to borrow for it to survive financially. All of a sudden, it's paying 4.35% or something like that on 10-year money. Who in their right mind would lend Italy money for 10 years, even at 4.35%? You're liable to see a negative 50% return on those bonds. So it's possible that this is a bigger problem for Europe, for the Eurozone in particular, than it is for the U.S. Because so many of the weak Eurozone countries just won't be able to survive under these circumstances.
And think about it. Would you loan money to Germany at 2.3% and not get as high a return, or would you loan it to Italy at 4.3%?
Well, that's an interesting thing now, because let's talk about Germany. They used to be the country that got it right. Of everybody in the world, Germany was probably the best managed country at one time.
Yes.
But since then, they've been making dumb mistake after dumb mistake. They basically went to, when they formed the Eurozone, they opened borders internally. So you had free movement from one European country to another, the same way that Americans go from one state to another. But apparently, at German assistance, they opened their external borders too and just let millions of North African refugees and other kinds of immigrants come in. And then once they land on a beach in Greece or Italy, they had unfettered internal mobility within the Eurozone. So they could all go to Paris and London, and that created a lot of political turmoil where you've got these right-wing parties that are anti-immigration gaining popularity all over Europe. And those guys are also Eurosceptics. So they're not really wedded to the idea of staying in the Eurozone at all. And then while Germany was doing that, they decided to close down all their nuclear plants and go to 100% renewables and Russian natural gas.
Very close.
Well, that turned out that renewables like solar and wind don't work all that well in a cloudy, not very windy country like Germany. So they didn't get nearly what they thought they were going to get from clean tech. And then, with the German or with the pipeline running natural gas to Germany from Russia, can I say the U.S. blew up that pipeline? Because we all know they did, but I don't think it's really official yet. And I don't want to get you banned, so I'm not going to say that.
They're accused of it, but yeah.
Okay. But anyhow, that pipeline got blown up. So now Germany is not getting enough gas from Russia to satisfy its needs. It's not getting enough electricity from solar and wind to satisfy its needs. And it's in kind of an energy crisis where it's having to close down big sections of its industrial economy. So where the rest of the Eurozone could function because, for instance, Italian and Greek bonds were seen as German bonds.
Yes.
And with the German economy backing up the ECB, that's no longer necessarily the case because Germany might not have the ability to bail out a $1 trillion economy like Italy. And definitely not if you include all the PIGS countries at once blowing up. It's not clear that Germany, via the ECB, could bail out all of those guys without crashing the euro. So they might have a bigger problem from turning off the money spigot than the U.S. does. And, we've got a big problem, so that's saying something. But if Europe and the U.S. both have basically the same kind of Ponzi scheme death spiral that it looks like is a complete possibility right now, then who knows what happens in the global economy. This is a big deal. We have not seen anything like this in our lifetimes.
Between the U.S. and EU, 45% of global economic activity. All right, they're closing factories in China. There's a couple of YouTube channels where they went around the ports to look at the empty containers. And literally, it's empty containers as far as the eye can see. I mean, it could be a good opportunity. There were those companies that were converting containers into houses, into small houses. You stack them up, you put them next to each other. So it could be a big opportunity in the reusable container housing market in China. But outside of that, I don't see much rights, and then you've got also the decoupling of the U.S. and China, which is also taking place. And I would say the West is decoupling to some extent from China. And then you've got the failure of the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative. Basically, they invested all this money. They loaned people money. It's like a chapter out of the Confessions of an Economic Hitman, the Belt and Road Initiative. Get everyone into hock, loan them money, wait for them to default, and then take over the countries. Kind of like what the U.S. used to do when Guatemala tried to seize or Costa Rica tried to seize the banana plantations of U.S. fruit. And, that's when you got gunboat diplomacy. I'm wondering if Beijing is going to resort to gunboat diplomacy to collect all these loans. Another example, right here in the Bahamas, they built this huge casino, which was totally unnecessary in Nassau, a complex of hotels. For billions of dollars, China financed it. It immediately, the Chinese Export or International Bank financed it. It immediately went bankrupt because Chinese aren't going to go gambling in the Caribbean. That's just not their thing. And, now I guess China owns the island just about. All these trends taking place here. It's, you got to wonder, we going to see that first quarter collapse or maybe even late summer collapse?
What you're talking about with China is a variation of vendor financing. In other words, if you're selling something, you can loan your customer the money to buy it. And that works out great as long as they eventually can pay you back. Germany did that in Europe. They ran trade surpluses with all the PIGS countries. And now a lot of that debt is Germany is just going to have to eat it. China did the same thing with the Belt and Road Initiative, where there are big sections of the developing world that will never be able to pay China back.
No.
And so China is going to have to come in and take over these gigantic assets, which is going to raise, that's like back when the West owned all the energy assets of the Middle East, for instance. And eventually those countries rose up and nationalized those assets. So China might be looking at something like that if they don't play nice. They're going to have to extend and pretend on a lot of this debt to avoid countries just electing nationalists who nationalize the assets, and then China's out in the cold with the only option to invade or something. And they didn't want to do that. That's a U.S. thing. We had no problem invading other countries and murdering their leaders. China doesn't seem to want to do that, I don't think.
Yeah, well, what's interesting also is that there's an additional motivation behind the Belt and Road Initiative, is that it's a way to get money out of China, all right? You don't want to make money on these projects because then you have to send money back to China. You want to lose money, so then you get what authorized transfers out of China to these countries. And when there's a loss, who knows how much they're really losing. So it's a great opportunity to get flight capital out of China and invest it in the West or real estate, whatever you want to do. So the motivation has always, in my opinion, and this is a unique opinion to me, has always been in these projects, the Belt and Road, to lose as much money as possible. It's like that show, The Producers, remember? So Zero Mostel and Phil Silver, they figure out you don't want to make money in a Broadway play. You want to lose it. And then you get all this investment in from all these rich widows, and you lose the money. You say, sorry, honey. And that's what happened. But then the thing turns into a success, and they wind up having to pay all these investors. And of course, that's when they find out it was a big Ponzi scheme. So the key here is, the goal is all these projects outside of China is to fail, but not fail so much that the government has to come in, fail enough so you can keep siphoning money out of China and into the West. That's my theory.
Okay. It sounds like an official version of capital flight, right? They're just shipping as much capital outside the country as they can in anticipation of bad things happening internally and stuff. In today's world, that isn't even the top 5 crazy ideas. So,
hey, the top crazy idea is RFK Jr. is going to challenge Biden. Now, look, if it's an honest primary, I believe that RFK would probably win. But there's not going to be any debates, and there probably won't be any TV. He'll be barred. They'll send him, the only interview he'll be able to get is on Tucker Carlson's website.
Well, that's true. Nobody will talk to him in the mainstream media. But you know what? You go on Tucker Carlson's website and Joe Rogan, and you've been seen by 10 times as many people as would see you if you went on CNN or MSNBC. So I think for the first time ever, the alternative media is big enough to do an end run around the mainstream media. So, it's completely possible that, and another reason why it's possible is that he appeals to both right and left, because the whole anti-vaccine thing he did plays very well within Fox's current audience. And with libertarians, there's an awful lot of people out there who believe he's been right and Fauci's been wrong, which means he gets a very broad-based potential audience. And you're right, if he ever debated Biden, he'd make 40 points of, up that day, because Biden really shouldn't be doing debates right now against anybody. And to be doing them, and Kennedy is articulate with a really good memory for facts, figures, and details. So he would be throwing real facts and figures at Biden, who will be coming back with stories about corn pop and stuff like that, from when he was 17 years old. And I think it would be ugly. It'll be very ugly.
Okay. So in the meantime, like all of these TV personalities are getting fired. Don Lemon, on CNN. They canned him because he was a misogynist. I don't know. I don't know exactly what that means in his case, but evidently he didn't play well with his colleagues. Tucker Carlson is shown the door. What do you think about Tucker Carlson?
Tucker Carlson, I think it was inevitable because he was so far off the reservation. Because he was anti-war when the entire mainstream media is in favor of the Ukraine war. He's anti-immigration in a way that makes sense when a huge chunk of the mainstream is pro-immigration. What else? There were three or four other things.
And anti-big pharma.
Oh, anti-big pharma, that's right.
Basically, like the week before he got fired, he went on a rant about big pharma owning the media. 70% of their advertising revenue.
That could have done it right there. If somebody of CNN did that, it would have been over.
That's it. I said, that is it. And then he'd have these outside the mainstream guests on, like Jimmy Dore and like RFK Jr. And
yeah, that's right. He got fired right after the RFK interview.
Yeah, so I'm sure it was a confluence of events, but he never invited you or me on, which was a big mistake on his part. Might have gotten him fired a couple of years earlier, John, if he invited us.
Yeah. Well, maybe his website will be more or open to alternative voices, even.
I think
but the Jimmy Dore thing. Everybody who's listening to this who didn't hear the Jimmy Dore thing, go check that out. It was astounding to hear something like that in mainstream media.
Yeah, and I don't always agree with Jimmy Dore. I think he's a useful idiot sometimes, but he does speak his mind. He's not beholden to anyone, and he makes some really good points. I used to watch him every day a few years back. I believe what's going to happen now is there has been no heir to Rush Limbaugh. Okay. Now, Rush Limbaugh is more of a doctrinaire Republican conservative, but in his later years realized the futility of that party and the corruption of it. But when he went, basically the right completely lost its way. Tucker Carlson's more of a right/libertarian freethinker. But I see this as his opportunity, or perhaps the natural transfer or devolution of the party from Rush Limbaugh to Tucker Carlson. And Kerry,
he'll be able to do it with multimedia. He will have access to so much more in terms of delivery than Rush Limbaugh ever did. So yeah, you saw his. He did this little podcast thing the day after he got
5 million views. Yeah,
it's up to 57 million now.
Oh, really?
So he normally got 3,000 views, or 3 million views, and so he got almost 10 times as many viewers with a podcast than his show on Fox got. So yeah, it's going to be gigantic.
He has been liberated to actually become his own platform or affiliate with another platform, but basically run it. I know you have to go. In any event, make sure you go to John's site, RubinoSubstack.com, subscribe to his material, and send us emails, kl@kerrylutz.com. Leave comments on the YouTube below. And John, we'll talk to you in a couple weeks.
Thanks, Kerry. Talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, your solution to today's trying times. For the latest, go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.